morning, good afternoon to folks abroad. You're all very welcome to IT at Cork's webinar on remote working. And this was something, I guess, for a lot of people was very much a luxury until recent times, now very much a necessity in this new norm that we're finding ourselves in globally. My name is Gillian Bergen. The day job for me is business transformation for Dell Technologies. But this morning, as Vice Chair of IT at Cork, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this early morning session, and thank you for joining at the early hour. Few pieces of information just to get us all started and to make sure that you can get the most from the event. We are recording this session and we will make it available via social media afterwards. So any questions asked and every interaction from the panel will all be recorded and distributed afterwards. During the event, we'll also issue some polls, and this is just to get sentiment and to get some data from the call. So Owen, if you could bring one of those polls up on screen now so our audience can see what that looks like. And we'll ask people just to have an opinion on this one. Do please have an opinion on these as they pop up throughout the session. And again, we will make this data available via social media and LinkedIn and our website afterwards. Okay, so that's what that looks like. There will be an opportunity to ask questions of the panel later on, and we'll let you know when and how to do that. And finally, at the very end, there will be just a 2-question survey to ask you what you thought of this event and would you like to see more of them. It's really, you know, a 2-second survey, so it'd be great if you could fill that out too. Okay, to get us started, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to spend 1 minute introducing themselves, so who they are, what they do, the company they work for, and what that company does. So we'll start, Anthony, 1 minute or less. We'll go straight to you now.
Thanks, Jill. So morning, folks, and thanks for joining. So my name is Anthony O'Callaghan. I'm essentially representing kind of 2 camps here today. So firstly, I'm the current chairperson of IT at Cork, and I wanted to thank you all for your continued support of the organisation. Secondly, in my kind of day-to-day role, I'm the CIO within the Carberry Group, who are headquartered here in West Cork. We're a leading food and ingredients and dairy business, I guess, with operations all over the world.
Super, thanks, Anthony. And so we'll go next now to John Goulding from WorkVivo.
Hi guys, good morning to everybody. Thanks, Gillian. My name is John Goulding. I am the CEO of WorkVivo. WorkVivo is an employee communication platform. We're the employee communication platform used by organizations of all sorts of shapes and sizes across 40 countries, and we're headquartered in Cork, and delighted to be joining this morning.
Super, thanks John for joining. Now we'll move next to Yvonne Frost from Populo.
Morning everyone, delighted to be joining you this morning. My name is Yvonne Frost. I am VP of Employee Experience at Populo. Populo was founded in Cork. We have 250 employees. Our head office is here in Cork with an office in Boston and a number of remote workers. So what Populo does, our software helps the largest and the most successful organizations in the world communicate to their employees through their voice of company communications.
Brilliant, thanks Yvonne. And finally, Shane Evans from Scraping Hub. We'll move to you now.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Shane Evans, the CEO of Scraping Hub. We provide our customers with web data to innovate and grow their businesses. Now, the applications include things like competitive and market intelligence, news monitoring. We provide a lot of data to companies that are using it for AI or machine learning. And our customers range from some of the largest tech companies through to even local startups. Now, I've been working remotely for 17 or 18 years. This is actually my 3rd remote company. I co-founded Scraping Hub in 2010. And we did it as a remote first company. My co-founder and I were in 2 separate countries, and all of our first hires were not local. We're now 180 people from all over the world with no central office, but I'm based in Cork and about 20 of us are, and we work out of the Republic of Work sometimes.
Brilliant, thanks Shane. Love that idea of no central office. So thank you team. As you can see folks, there's a lot of expertise in this remote working area on the panel. We're looking forward to their insights and sharing their significant experience with us all. So the format from here will be each of our panelists will speak for a few minutes, just some thoughts they want to get across and some things that they want to speak about. Then we'll move into a panel discussion where members of the panel will be invited to have an opinion on specific questions and to discuss stuff between themselves. And then we will move to the Q&A from the audience. So without further ado, and in the interest of time, Anthony, is it okay if I move directly to you now for your update? And you may, unmute.
Yep. Perfect, got it. Yeah, so guys, I won't take a whole load of time here, because genuinely I'm kind of fascinated by the story from the other panelists as well, right? I think they have a kind of good story to tell, right? So look, I suppose just briefly, right, I suppose like all of us here, right, you know, COVID-19 has kind of hugely changed how we operate within the Carberry Group, right? You know, we operate in locations such as, you know, China, we operate in Italy, and I suppose where we saw the initial outbreaks of the virus, right? And because of that, we saw quite early on the steps that governments were taking, and it allowed us to react a little bit quicker and prepare. I suppose we had to spin up quite quickly to react to a business continuity scenario that doesn't exist in any company's plan in terms of how we're reacting here. Probably unlike the other panelists here today, we had to engage a hybrid model, right? Because our world centers around production, and we need to get product out the door. And I suppose we needed to quickly figure out, you know, how can we work remote, and how can we ensure that the remote workforce has what they need, right? But also ensure that our production facilities are protected and that we've sufficient measures in place should any of the key personnel required in terms of producing product need to self-isolate, etc. as well, right? So it kind of threw a different bit of a problem at us as well, right? And it's something that we have to solution in quite a short space of time. Within the Carberry Group, I suppose, look, we're at the very early stages of a group-wide digital transformation, right? And COVID-19 has certainly accelerated all of these initiatives, right? So from basic items like, you know, when this happened, there was a massive run on simple things like laptops, and they became an incredibly rare commodity very early on, right? So we had to quickly figure out, you know, who we can get them from in all our locations globally, how can we ship them, etc. You know, let's say we had to sign up to conference services very, very quickly as well and scale up the number of accounts that we needed. We needed to sign up to new VPN services in some locations. And then we had to look at more advanced items, right? So, you know, how can we leverage augmented reality as well, right? So in that scenario where someone needs to self-isolate, how can we use augmented reality glasses in order to continue operating as well within production? We're already in the midst of looking at RPA platforms and really looking at, you know, how can we leverage those platforms to automate some tasks and to ease the transition from on-site to remote. And I suppose in a weird way, COVID-19 has instigated a need for an expedited digital transformation within many organizations such as ours, right? We're not alone here. In parallel to that then, or I suppose in parallel to Carberry, we have IT at Cork, which is the secondary role that I'm involved in, right? And in contrast, that migration to remote working, you know, was seamless, right? You know, all our team moved off-site overnight. We leveraged platforms such as Zoom to continue running sessions like this, which is something that we actually started in Tech Summit 2019. And I think it's important that we show that, you know, life can still go on, right? And thanks to Owen and Jill and Vivian and Lisa and Annette and the team in IT at Cork, right? They're doing a great job in showing that we can continue to bring the tech community together via mediums like this, right? And we really wanted to leverage a technology first approach because of the type of organization that we represent, right? So we reacted there very quickly, right? And I think you can kind of see with the series of events like today, like the events that we're now running every week, right? That we're just trying to demonstrate that, I suppose, life goes on and we can still continue to leverage a community that's out there to kind of deliver those kind of quality events, right? And look, I'll stop here, right? But I just wanted to quickly mention as well, right? In the last 4 weeks, genuinely the number of companies that have contacted me to see if we can help them get in contact with the HSE in order to offer free support has been incredible, right? And I just wanted to make sure I mention, because genuinely it's made me very proud to be Irish, but it's also made me very proud to be involved in a tech community like this, right? So for those of you on the call who've reached out, I just wanted to publicly thank you, because it's been very humbling. Thanks, Jill.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anthony. And I'd say, you know, like yourselves, there's many companies out there who have accelerated their digital transformation efforts significantly in the last 2 weeks. There's nothing like a burning platform. Thank you for that. And we'll move now to John Goulding. So John, if you can take it from here for a few minutes.
Great. Thanks, Gillian, and thanks to Anthony. Yeah, just a couple of things I suppose that I'll talk about. Basically, I suppose mainly observations. We've obviously all started working remotely, and it's working very well. But I'll talk about two, I suppose, topics. One, I suppose we're a technology company, we're a communication platform, and employee communication is becoming hugely important, no more important than ever. But I suppose first I'll just talk about the people side of things before I talk about technology. On the people side of things, three things I'll talk about just in terms of observations: assumptions, trust, and humanity. And what I mean by that is on assumptions, I think what's happened here is the assumption that certain work can't be done remotely. I think it's been blown out of the water, right? I think the whole remote working agenda has moved 10 years in the space of a month. And I think a lot of good things will come out of that as well. So the assumption that work can't be done remotely, I think that's gone. We're going live with several organizations this week that are accelerating going to us, using us as an employee communication platform. But what we're actually seeing is one of those is a large corporation in the US that we've never met. Through the sales process, we haven't met them physically. Through the contract negotiation process, we haven't met them physically. And through the implementation process, we haven't met them physically. And we'll be live with them tomorrow, which is great. But it presents an interesting dynamic, actually, and it presents an interesting dynamic for Irish companies, I think, where we're now able to compete on a level playing field with competitors of ours that would be in California, would be in New York, because the feet on the ground doesn't provide an advantage, and that presents an opportunity as well, which is a good thing. On the trust piece, I think this crisis has, for me, accelerated it's forced the trust issue, right? Which again I think is a very positive thing. I heard a great comment recently. You know, if you don't trust your people to work remotely, then why did you hire them in the first place? And for me, I think human instinct, and I would be a fan of remote working. I'd like to do a day or two from home every week if I can. I find it just more productive. And I think when you work from home, it can be very intense. And I think the challenge, I think for managers in an organization, for leaders, I think it's not to check up on people that they're working. I think it's to check up on, are they actually taking breaks? Are they actually striking the right balance? Because I think working from home, it's very easy to get into you're in the same room, and for a lot of people don't have the luxury of having an office in the home. So some people, I suppose we've got to be conscious, some of our people are potentially working from their bedrooms, where they've got maybe a makeshift desk in their bedrooms. So they could end up spending like 20 hours a day or something in one room in a house, which isn't healthy. So I think it has forced a trust issue, which I think is a great thing. I don't think we'll be coming back from that. I think that's a good thing that we're going to take forward. The third thing I talk about on the people side is humanity, and what I mean by that is I think it's now perfectly acceptable for any of us. I think just before everybody joined, Anthony had his young daughter on his lap there, and I think it's fabulous. I think I've been on conference calls recently with people in the US, Zoom calls, and there's kids walking in the background, there's dogs barking. I think we all remember the famous BBC interview 4 years ago where the professor was giving an interview, very serious interview, and his 4-year-old child walked in, and then the 9-month-old walked in. And that went viral. I don't think it would go viral now. It's just not, it's just normal. And I think that's only a good thing. You know, we can get work done at home while normal life happens around us as well. And I think that's a positive thing. I think that would have naturally happened over time, but I think this has certainly accelerated it. On the technology front, obviously we're a communication platform. I think the role of communication is obviously coming very much into focus. One thing I would say is communication it's not just to inform. I think for all of us, communication, it has to engage as well. So people just don't want updates. I think people need to be engaged. The challenge is to make sure communication isn't transactional. it's to ideally help people feel connected with the organization as well. And what we're seeing some of our customers do on our platform, some of them, in fairness, have been doing this for quite a while, so it's been an easy transition. And with their permission, I am able to talk about some of the things they're doing. So we've seen video being used a lot more now. So we've seen leaders of organizations in the likes of Enterprise Ireland, the likes of Boss Éireann, Morgan McKinley, who are giving regular updates to their staff on our platform. And it can be any platform, but there's a human element to the video updates that is connecting with people. I think we're all, by our nature, social creatures as well. And what we've seen most effective is organizations that are giving regular updates on what's going on. The business is continuing to operate, and they're doing that in an engaging way. But also there's a nice social mix as well. We've seen one of our customers, Enterprise Ireland, do a very cool thing around a virtual daffodil day during the week on our platform, and it was very cool and it was very engaging. And I think that's something that is critically important. Again, we are social creatures, so I think it's not just informing; it's engaging as well. So thanks. That's.
Lovely, thanks, John. Love that assumptions, trust, and humanity mix. And we're going to talk a little later certainly about trust, and also more about humanity stuff and how important it is to take breaks. You know, and even myself, I never thought I'd get so excited about taking a trip to the TV room or the living room or something. And we're even thinking, and some of us are even moving our 1-hour meetings to 45 minutes to encourage people to get up and walk around, take a break in that 15 minutes in between. Just because you're not going from one part of the office to the other, it is important to keep moving and to stay active. So we're now going to move to Yvonne Frost, and Yvonne's going to give us some ideas on how we can support employees when it's not so much business as usual as they're used to. So Yvonne, over to you.
Thanks, Gillian. Yeah, so I mean, these are really unprecedented times that we find ourselves in, and all of us having to adapt to remote working and kind of getting all of our workforce set up remotely. From a Poplo perspective, around 5% of our employees work full-time remote, and then the rest of us, might take a day or half a day during the week. Interestingly, I suppose, as we've had to adapt to this whole situation, and all of us had to adapt so quickly as well, there's always an opportunity for learning. And I think what I'd say to anyone listening in, keep note of those learnings, things you do differently along the way. I know I have a few already, and they can be easily forgotten. Interestingly, for Poplo in 2011, which was a great source of learning for us, we were based in Bandon at the time, and overnight there were floodings, and we had to evacuate. Literally, the water was coming up to the desks, and we had to support our customers and to react to that situation. We put in a really robust business continuity plan at the time. And I'm sure a lot of people listening in will relate to that, because I think we're going to look at business continuity in a different way. I mean, 2 or 3 months back, if we looked at this situation, not in our wildest dreams, would we have expected a pandemic. So I think that has stood to us. And in adapting and reacting, I think one of the key pieces, and a lot of what John has said has resonated there, is getting a cross-functional team together, because you can't solve the problems or you can't adapt to the situation if you don't know what those problems are. So, HR, IT, facilities, get who's going to do the communications, get that person involved so the decisions can be made and that the challenges can bubble up. And I think, we're only starting this process. We don't know what's coming over the coming weeks. So if you don't have that in place, that would be a recommendation straight away. And it's not business as usual. That's what I'd say as well. If we were mobilizing our workforce to work remotely, we wouldn't do that overnight, as we've had to adapt. So we are essentially reacting to that. But also when we're offering people advice about working remotely, they have incredible circumstances in their own homes. You know, they're trying to potentially care for small children. You know, there's the stress of and uncertainty of what's happening outside of the workplace, and that kind of constant, you know, bombardment of news and updates and uncertainties, and that is incredible stress that goes with that. And everyone is adapting to that. So I think us as employers need to be really sympathetic and flexible and understanding, and also the rapid change. Not everyone does well with change, and being told overnight that you're going to work remotely from home, that your structure, your routine, and everything that you have in place is going to change, that, you know, that you're going to be minding children at the same time as doing conference calls and working with your co-workers. So I think really to be conscious of the mental health issues that may start bubble up, and for us as employers and co-workers, check in on people, see how they're doing, and support them and help them out. I know there's a lot of kind of focus around productivity. I think we're going to have to adapt over the next few weeks, support everyone, and do absolutely what we can. Communication, you know, obviously we're in the business of communication. We see with our customers, that communication really is the gel that's going to keep people together at this time, to not only just to inform them, but to support them, to reassure them. John was mentioning there the importance of video. I think a lot of people are feeling really isolated now, working at home, being at home, and they want the reassurance of their leaders, whether it's their CEO, whether it's their line manager, or whether it's their co-worker. There is uncertainty, so we don't have all the answers, but we can give updates per week, what's happened this week and what we see happening next week. I'd be very cautious around, making promises of what's going to happen in a month's time, because I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen in a month's time. So the communication style, what we've done a lot in Popolo now, we've started sending out a daily newsletter. We call it the Daily Buzz. It goes out at 9 o'clock every morning, and it's the feedback from our employees. It's highly valuable to start your day. The reassurance, this is all you need to know. Here are key messages, tips or tricks from your co-workers. You know, trying to build that community around working remotely. And I think in Popolo, I really miss the energy of my team. That's something that I get energy from my team every day. You know, our daily stand-ups, what's happening, how they're overcoming challenges. So looking at and making the tech solve that problem for us. So understanding the problems and adapting to that. But that daily newsletter we've got great feedback on that, and it's using communications to keep people connected, to understand the issues and adapt and react really quickly. Because I think the risk is that people are experiencing challenges and they're not seeing any action or any reaction to those challenges. So giving a forum to listen, to understand what the issues are, and to put solutions in place. And I think tech and the technology that people are using in their business can solve those problems. But I think the piece around the cross-functional, I think people coming together to solve these problems. I know I can't solve them, but I have a fantastic team that I work with, whether it's someone in IT and facilities, our CTO, all of these people come together and we can solve these problems together. So I think that collaboration piece is key.
Brilliant, thanks Yvonne. And definitely, I think we're all seeing now the true importance of communicating, over communicating, for keeping teams engaged. But also I'm hearing from all the speakers today the importance of putting people first, and putting trust, starting with from an area of trust, and then the productivity follows. So it's great to hear that from everybody. We're going to move now to Shane from Scraping Hub. So Shane's going to talk about transitioning to remote working. So Anthony mentioned earlier that, you know, those two different sides of groups that transition, an organization that transition very easily to this, and others where it's happening slower and it's much more difficult, and the setup is taking longer. So Shane, I know you have some slides, so I'll ask you now to share the screen, and I'll hand to you.
Thanks, Gillian. And just while I'm bringing up the slides here, I just want to say that even for companies like us who are very used to remote working, we're still transitioning to a new normal. When, you know, our worlds have also been turned upside down. Most of us aren't used to maybe having their partners, having their kids at home. Many of us work from co-working spaces rather than actually work from home. So this is a change everybody's adapting to. Don't feel bad that you're doing remote work wrong. It's usually not like this. So, okay, you can all see my slides now, right? Okay, brilliant. So the first thing up is communicating remotely. So how you communicate will need to change. Now, I know several of the panelists have already talked about this, but you'll need to be far more deliberate in terms of how you communicate with your staff. Things that might have happened easily in person, especially if you maybe rely on seeing other people, managing by walking around, you'll need to plan to do them much more deliberately in a remote environment. Remote teams in general tend to favor asynchronous written communication. That's to say, you know, sending messages, sending maybe newsletters, emails, and others can reply. Sometimes at a time that's more convenient for them. It doesn't require everybody to be in person, be there online at the same time. It doesn't require, maybe somebody who's away can catch up later. It's a bit more inclusive. It tends to work better in a remote setting. Now, that being said, meetings can sometimes work better. You don't always need to be writing everything down. If it requires a lot of back and forth, if it requires a decision making, you can get on a call. Not every meeting needs to be 1 hour. So, you know, Gillian, you made the point about 45-minute meetings being the default. That's a good one, get a break in between. But also sometimes it just needs a 5-minute chat. You don't need to drag it into a much longer meeting, or if it's a really in-depth, plan a much longer session with breaks in between. You don't need to go with calendar defaults the whole time. And, you know, one consistent piece of advice you get from remote working companies is that you need to over communicate. If you're in doubt, you're not sure if you should share something, just share it. It usually doesn't take long to read things. You're not engaging everybody in a conversation and distracting them from work necessarily if you're doing it right. And generally favor group messages over direct private one-to-ones. It's more inclusive. You can catch more people up later. You don't need to repeat things multiple times. You don't need to communicate always in the same way as you would in an office. Establish guidelines, the norms, policies around how to use your tools, around what's appropriate in your company. When we were small, this didn't matter so much. We quickly converged on something, but then as we brought more people in, you know, people wonder, oh, is it okay to message all these people? What's the right use of this channel? When should I use Slack versus email versus some other tool? We can share ours, but there's also some good resources online. So informal interactions, you know, how do you promote those water cooler moments? A lot of people worry about this when you go remote, and there's no equivalent, no direct equivalent, but there's plenty of other things you can do. And what works might change over time. I was making notes there, I think as John was speaking about Enterprise Ireland's virtual Daffodil Day. We do those kind of themed events as well. They're great, they're good fun. We have other things we do. Donut is a tool we use where it randomly pairs people. You can opt in if you want to. And they get together and talk. It's just a good way to get to know people. We do our own version of TED Talks that we call Shub Talks. People can talk about anything. They're really entertaining. I've learned lots through them. Some of them are work related, some aren't. Yeah, we do water cooler chats, coffee with the chief. This is a water cooler chat with me that I do a few times a month with different people. There's no set agenda. We just get together and talk about things. We have a wellness circle. We have a photography group. So the background, if you can see my virtual background here, that was one that was posted on our Slack channel. It's actually a shot somebody took at our company get together in Lisbon. So we got the whole company together in person. Those things are great. Unfortunately, we can't do them now, but they create a great atmosphere for our remote working companies, and many companies will try and do this. But, you know, sharing photography, having a photography channel for people who are into it. We run competitions around this. The winner gets to set my desktop background. So I've had some funny desktop backgrounds over the last couple of months. So yeah, those are, I will say as well, like it's great to have champions that will run these kind of things, but cross-functional teams are great as well to drive some of this agenda. You know, representatives from different groups. I think Yvonne was talking about this, but we found cross-functional teams for many things like this really help. And it gets that communication flowing as well across in a remote environment. So helping employees. So we usually do this during onboarding, of course. But, you know, this is such a change for everybody. I think it's probably worth considering putting something in place or at least addressing it. IT tech support, you know, people often don't know how to deal with issues. Maybe their Wi-Fi doesn't work, you know, stuff some people might take for granted. Not everybody this is probably quite a technical audience, but not everybody in the organization will know how to maybe even make simple adjustments, extend the range of the Wi-Fi or whatever, get the kids off Netflix. Communicate expected working hours. Some people might be worried about, oh, can I be more flexible now? I think everybody needs to adjust as well. Now that people are minding children from home, maybe they're sharing their working shifts or etc. What's the expectations in your company? I think it helps to discuss it and helps to be clear about it. We would have done that anyway, even in a remote working environment, because we do work flexibly, but at the same time, we need to know when people are available for meetings, etc. So we've got a policy in place for that, where we make our calendars open, we block out times we're not available. We're fine with people being very flexible, as long as, they attend the key meetings and we can plan stuff ahead of time. So yeah, look, it's about setting expectations. Working hours as well, snooze your Slack notifications. You don't need to be contacted out of working hours. It's really tempting when you're working from home to just be online the whole time. And that's not necessary. It's not good for everybody. Very few people actually expect it. You need to unplug and it will help you. Mental health, wellness initiatives, those have been huge. And, Yvonne was talking about this as well, but it's even more important now. Even under normal circumstances, people can feel a bit isolated working remotely, and that can be one of the downsides. But now we've lost all of our, maybe personal hobbies, friends, family you would have been meeting with in person. So, and you've got all this other stresses coming around the coronavirus and trying to work at the same time to deal with other stuff. So really, you have to be very aware of it now. And then company handbook. Now you all would have company handbooks anyway, but this has been one of the key things for remote working, is that it's far more of an active document. I took this away from meeting one of the GitLab co-founders, but just they have everything written down. It's done so well. If people have any frequently asked questions, it's in the handbook. If you're dealing with, if you have asynchronous communication in your organization, then if you have a lot of small questions, it can sometimes take a while to get them answered. You're blocked on things. If that's written down, there's somewhere you can go to get answers. People like self-servicing in that way. And it seems to work well for remote companies. So I think that's something to consider. If you've got, your key policies, things people need to know on a day-to-day basis, if that's somewhere they can access, that will make working remotely easier for them. Employee feedback is key. Communication and employee feedback. I think we're covered with with Populo and WorkVivo here. You can probably send them some good questions, but this is really key. And maybe it's easier in an office. You can maybe see people's faces. You can use different ways to get a good sense for how people, for the mood and how things are going. So we would rely a lot on employee surveys. Those kind of pulse surveys at regular intervals, so you can spot trends over time. We can dissect the data by department or team, so we can spot at-risk groups or if things are going wrong. Anonymous feedback is brilliant. We got just a wave of stuff when we first launched it, but now it's pretty good. But these are feedback where people can speak anonymously, but we can have a two-way conversation while protecting their anonymity. So people will say stuff directly to me now that they wouldn't normally maybe be so confident to say to the CEO. And that's been wonderful. Cross-departmental groups, I can't stress how well these work. Getting the right groups of people together from across the organization. It's got to be a bit more deliberate, a bit more structured in a remote environment, but set it up and let them run with it. For us, has worked really well. Your regular one-on-one meetings, you're probably doing them anyway, but I'd say take it a little bit further. Just make sure you are very structured. Make sure you kind of go through the people you normally interact with and say, if I haven't talked to Gillian in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'll just get a regular slot in our calendar to make sure that we do check in. And that's my point about skip level meetings as well. So I would go, okay, maybe not outside of just my direct reports. Who else should I have some regular communication cadence and just be deliberate about it and make sure it happens. And finally, culture. There seems to be a tendency among remote working companies to really value openness and really value trust. And I'd say that's nearly, for me anyway, this is becoming an established good practice. And it needs to be reflected in how people manage, in how you treat your staff. Managers that need to see activity, that they feel they can't trust people if they're not monitored, they're going to struggle more with remote working. And you might have people like that in your organization, and I think you need to help them. We always say measure output, not hours. I mean, that's good practice anyway. But in my opinion, it's probably the only way you can really manage effectively remotely. And the only way you're actually going to be comfortable with it. So with that, I think that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Super, thanks Shane. So we're very much seeing a mix in order to make remote working successful. It needs to be a mix of productivity and engagement and getting work done and having fun doing it. So you're seeing, you know, these important water cooler 15-minute meetings or virtual coffees, and they may sound a little unusual at the beginning, but they're certainly worth having. And I know we're running them, and the feedback from everybody is that yes, let's do more of these. They're important timeouts during the day. So it's very much a mix of productivity and mental health. So we're now going to move to a panel discussion. So we have some questions that have been submitted in advance, which we're going to talk with the panel with now. But in the meantime, I would invite folks to please use that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to submit some questions. I see there's a couple in already. So please use this time to send those through, and we'll start talking to those very shortly. Okay, so what have we got here? John, I think I'm going to start with you. You know, physically distant employees doesn't necessarily mean disengaged employees, right? How can remote workers stay connected is one. Truly work together, and so that's regarding productivity. And then finally, feel like a team, that emotional attachment that we have to our teams. You're on mute there, John.
Okay, yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, I suppose first of all, I think the first thing to recognize is engagement by its very nature. If you look at the definition of engagement, it's the emotional connection between the employee, the organization, and what the organization is trying to achieve. And I think firstly recognizing that it is an emotional thing, right? People are engaged if they feel emotionally connected to the organization, what the organization is trying to do. Recognizing that, I think it is very possible to celebrate, you know, what the business is achieving, things like go lives, etc. that I talked about earlier, and they can still be celebrated in the virtual world, right, in the digital world. So what we're doing, we're still, you know, celebrating these things. We're using our own platform, obviously, for that kind of stuff, but we're also using things like Zoom meetings, where we're using them for the business, celebrating the business achievements, but also we're releasing like birthday videos and kind of managing the social side and the emotional side as well. I think some of the things that were talked about earlier by Yvonne, by Shane, by Anthony, I think things like the water cooler moments, I think that's where some of the emotional connection to colleagues and the organization itself happens. And for us, we're learning some practical things like, you know, daily stand-ups. We do daily stand-ups. We're doing them on Zoom now, but I'm certainly trying to purposely allow a few minutes at the start for just a little bit of social interaction and what's going on. I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of going with the transactional and talking about projects and where they're at. And I think as humans, we need that bit of social interaction as well to keep us engaged. But I think that the tools, the technologies are there to facilitate, I suppose, mirroring what happens in the working environment. I think the challenge is just to recognize those things that are important in the office, like those water cooler moments, and they can be replicated in the digital world, as I think we're all seeing.
Super, thanks, John. And we certainly have seen the creativity come out in people in the last 2 weeks. The engagement now is kind of happening organically, and teams are finding new ways to connect and to have a laugh and to share stories. So it's really inspiring. Yvonne, maybe if I move to you for a minute, the responsibility, I want to talk about the responsibilities on employers. So, you know, now that work from home has come to us all, whether we wanted it or not, and we're all making it work, there is a minimum technology setup that's provided by your company. You know, you're possibly given a laptop and maybe a screen or whatever it is you need to be productive on the technology side. What about the office setup? Because if we're in this for the long haul, you know, it's important to have a comfortable seat. If you're sitting in it 8 to 10 hours a day, it's important to have a proper desk. I know someone whose table right now is an ironing board in their bedroom. You know, we're making stuff work at the moment, but it's not you know, something that you could do long term. Where's the responsibility on the employer with regard to, say, being enabled to work from home, and in particular that office setup scenario?
Absolutely, Gillian. It's really, it is the responsibility of the employer to make sure that the employees are safe in their working environment. What I'd say to anyone listening in, the HSA have a fantastic page on their website. It's an FAQ, and it outlines all the responsibilities of employers and employees, particularly during this time. You know, they're being quite pragmatic. You know, it's not business as usual, but there's a minimum expectation. What I'd say to people is, look, we don't want to be coming out of this with bad necks and bad backs and bad eyesight. It's not really acceptable to be working for long periods of time on a laptop. So that second screen, you know, employers should try and facilitate people getting that second screen. Also, sitting for long periods on a dining room chair. I wouldn't be able to walk if I did that. So making sure that people have, you know, a proper office table and a chair. What we've done is, you know, there are basic guidelines around ergonomics that we've sent out to all employees. I have been in touch with some you can actually get remote ergonomic assessments done, and we've reached out to a number of our partners who are doing that this week and next for employees, and particularly people who have started to complain of you know, discomfort in their back from sitting, or just maybe they haven't got their setup correct. So I'd refer to that HSA website. I've also found IBEC fantastic. They have a page on their website. They actually have a podcast specifically around this. And once again, everyone's taking a fairly pragmatic approach and having the kind of minimum requirements that are keeping everyone safe in their working environment. So IBEC and the HSA is where I'd send people for both of those guidelines.
Brilliant, thanks, Ivana. And I guess the message there too is that there's a responsibility on both sides.
Yes.
The employer to make sure that you're working in a safe environment, but you as an employee as well, where you know what works. Nobody knows your house like you do, your setup like you do. So it's important to take those breaks, to get out for a walk, to, you know, take some meetings standing up, some sitting down, make sure that your neck and shoulders are at a good angle, move your screen, that kind of thing. These are sensible things that people can do. We must all play our part. So Anthony, you mentioned earlier this idea of a hybrid model. So for some companies, it's not as binary as it's work from home or it's not work from home. What happens when you need a mix?
Sorry, guys. Yeah, you can hear me? So yeah, so look, for sure there's a hybrid model, right? And that's what Carberry and a lot of companies like us are doing, right? So look, in our scenario, the show must go on, right? So our approach was very decisive, but it was simple, I guess. So those who can work remotely must go, and we must protect the operation as much as possible, right? In terms of protecting the operation, so technology played a vital role there, right? And you know, some of the simple items that we're leveraging, you know, let's say we leverage Zoom so that we're not all sitting in the same room when we're having meetings. You know, we're using kind of remote desktop for training, which was normally done side by side in the past. You know, as I said earlier, we're kind of looking at solutions like augmented reality as well, right, to be able to kind of keep the operation running should anyone need to self-isolate. So there's a lot of, let's say, technology solutions out there that can enable kind of keeping the show on the road for companies like ours, right? And we're quickly adopting them as well. I suppose that the interesting thing here is that, you know, while we're all focused on, you know, the here and now, which is completely understandable, I guess the next step is to look at, you know, how our world will change once we start to emerge from this as well, right? So, you know, and how can technology, you know, drive this new way of working, right? So for example, if we look at our sales process today, it's largely face-to-face, it's largely driven by site visits. You know, will that be allowed 12 months after this has ended? Will customers be willing to do that? Or, you know, do we need to replace those kind of face-to-face visits with virtual factory? We need to change up that sales process as well. I suppose in our world, we'd have a lot of engineers that would visit the site, to do, installations or remote fixes, etc. Will that now need to be replaced, because will engineers no longer be flying across the world in the next 6 months? Will we have to replace that with items like HoloLens, etc., to be able to do kind of remote diagnostics and repair, right? So, we're certainly looking at items like this, right? Because I don't think at the moment anyone knows what it's going to look like in 6 months' time, right? So it's kind of better to be safe than sorry, I guess, right? And I know we're not alone here, right? So I guess, look, it goes without saying, right? But the world that we knew kind of coming into this is going to be very different than the one that we emerge with, right? And, I think technology can be a massive enabler here as well, right?
Brilliant, thanks, Anthony. And Shane, finally, before we go to the audience Q&A, trust has been mentioned a few times. It's very much a two-way street as well. So, employers must give employees the space to get work done and empower them to get work done. And then the employee must be trusted to do that and to deliver. So Shane, could you, spend a minute there just talking about the importance of trust, and how maybe managers who are new to remote working and are a little bit out of their comfort zone in this one, how they can get their head around the starting with trust? Sure.
Well, look, I think for managers, just resist the urge to micromanage and see somebody's working. So this is good practice anyway, but set clear expectations and then give people the resources and support they'll need to be successful. Have regular check-ins, make sure there are milestones along the way. You can see stuff where things are going off track. But be transparent, share what's really happening with your staff, and make sure that information that they need is available, but also accessible, that it's in a way that people can understand it. I think that's one of the things that will help breed trust. For employees, be open, share your progress, share your work, go to more effort to present more regular status updates, and make yourself available during working hours. I'd at least make those expectations clear, maybe have that discussion with your boss. Whatever tool you use for communication during working hours, in our case, we do have guidelines, but follow them. Set yourself available in Slack, make your calendar available, or turn it off, make yourself unavailable if you're not there. It's that divide, so everybody knows where they stand really helps. And proactively share issues that come in a timely way. That helps keep the communication going on both sides. And for both people, and just assume positive intent, give people the benefit of the doubt, especially at a time like this. Identify the situational details, get a bigger picture, always assume positive intent first. Brilliant. Thanks, Shane. Okay, we're going to move now. We've a good few questions coming in, so I want to move to audience Q&A. So there's one in there which is the always on and instant communications can be very non-productive even during work hours. Some people even expect email to be instant communication. Do companies have work policies to help people on switching off messaging notifications when they don't need to be immediately responsive? Who'd like to take that one? I'm happy to share ours. We actually put them online on a blog post if you go to blog.scrapinghub.com. But no, anybody who sends me emails certainly will never get an immediate response. No, there's no intention. And we did make it very explicit. Slack means if you're available, you'll check in between meetings, or, maybe an hour. It might be a little while. If you mention somebody, so if you actually want them to respond rather than in a channel, then, you're likely to get a quicker response. If you just drop something in a channel, you could be waiting a long time. Emails maybe within a day reply, but we've been fairly explicit about this, and this is definitely good practice within a remote working environment. So even if you're not doing it now, haven't been doing it to date, it's probably a good time to start now. Super, thanks, Shane. And Anthony, this sounds like a good fit for you. So how do we use this disruptive opportunity to accelerate digital transformation in more traditional sectors of Irish society, such as oil and gas, automotive, infrastructure, and pharmaceuticals? Some sectors could really learn from IT at Cork members. So I guess two questions there, because you have that hybrid model going, and also is there an opportunity for IT at Cork members to come together and share experiences on this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Sorry, hard to catch me on the hop. So I suppose, look, there are areas for sure, right? Look, one that's kind of genuinely a kind of love of mine, right, is the area of kind of automation and AI, right? And I guess, look, any arguments in the past around kind of automation and AI, or arguments against automation and AI, have kind of gone out the window, right? And I think when you kind of look at platforms like that, they should be playing an active part in any business continuity strategy now going forward, right? I suppose if you think of our current situation, right, and you look at these platforms, right, they don't get sick, they don't take coffee breaks, they don't gossip, they work 24 hours a day, right? And they process repetitive tasks with ease and probably far faster than any human can, right? So I suppose if you kind of think about our current scenario, right, how much of a relief would it been, knowing that processes like AR, AP, payroll, insurance claims, etc., that they could continue being processed without the need for human intervention. The list of processes here are endless, right? And I think it's interesting, right? Because the talk about AI in the past was about it taking jobs, right? And it's funny to kind of look at it now, right? When you consider, huge companies that have invested heavily in automation, and now they rely on it very heavily as well, right? So if you look at big players like Infosys and Cognizant, with massive operations in India, etc., and then you look at local companies here on our doorstep, right? And I guess in these companies where AI is at the core of the operation, AI is actually saving jobs at the moment, right? Because it's allowing the engine to continue for a large number of processes, right? So they're still processing invoices, they're still pulling in payments, etc., while we all try to adjust our lives around this chaos, right? So look, I may be wrong, and I am a lot, right? But I definitely think after we emerge from this whole COVID-19 situation, right, we're going to see a massive acceleration around automation initiatives, right? I strongly believe that COVID-19 has just written the business case for any IT leader wanting to initiate an automation program within their organizations. And thankfully within IT at Cork, and I know there's one of the employees of this specific company on the call, there's a lot of companies here in Cork that are leveraging automation, and they're more than willing to share their success stories, right? So definitely IT at Cork can enable those best practices, and we do so regularly. We just did it on automation about 3 weeks ago with a selection of 20 folks from different companies, right? So for sure, we can do that, right? And it's probably a good idea to look at platforms on a medium like this going forward as well, right? Just showing people, what other companies are doing as well.
Thanks, Anthony. And I think if anybody is interested or would like IT at Cork to set up a particular call on something or create connections in a particular area to help them get through this time, please let us know. Contact us via the website or by any of our email addresses. John, this next one feels like a good fit for you. So has the events of recent weeks debunked the view that being physically present is the best way to establish rapport and trust with people? Will business trips abroad be as regular when the crisis is over? What do you think?
It's a great question. I think I'd go back to like something I mentioned earlier in terms of an opportunity, like the example I gave earlier where we're winning business in the US without ever, turning up for a sales meeting physically or turning up to implement physically, we're implementing remotely. I think the fact that we've shown that can be done, and not that just it can be done, I think we've always known it can be done, but the enterprises, and particularly if it's a large enterprise would typically want you to be on site, right? Now we're showing, and I think the customers are saying that, well, actually it can be done remotely. The selection process can be done remotely, the sales process, the implementation process. And I think that has, I think people's acceptance of that would have happened naturally over time. But I think no, I think like in Anthony's words, it's rewritten the business case, right? Or it's rewritten the rules. So I think there will be a natural acceptance of that type of thing going forward. So I think fundamentally, I think everything has changed, right? I think the rules have been rewritten. I think there won't be as much requirement for travel. It's interesting, I think Zoom got it right when you see even before this thing broke out, their advertisements for Zoom were strategically placed, at security. When you're going through security and it's painful to go through security, and you're looking at the ads for Zoom, and it's like, yeah, you know what, we should be doing this in Zoom. I don't need to be jumping on a plane here. So absolutely, fundamentally, I think it's changed, and for me, I think it's changed for the better.
Super, thanks, John. There's a number of questions coming in as well about, when all this is over, what will it look like? Will we all revert back to the way it was before? Will it be a mix? Should we continue to work remotely? And I'm sure it'll be very much a mix, and so it should be in case we run into one of these situations again in the future. But there will be some people who now really enjoy the idea of work from home. There'll be some people who hate it. There's some people very happy to do videos, others not comfortable with it at all. So it's going to be, I see, a very mixed world as we go forward. I'd like to finish this Q&A section here with a question that's coming from our colleagues in India, and thank you very much for joining. And I guess it's around a lot of the work we're working on right now is work that was maybe teed up 3, 4, 5 weeks ago when we had all those face-to-face meetings, and so we're being very productive. Lots of companies during this time seeing no impact at all to their operations. They're fully enabled to work from home, and it's continuing. What happens when that work runs out? So the exact question here is, we find accountability of our employees going down while working from home. How do we ensure project ownership remains high, specifically in long haul work from home or remote location scenario? Who'd like to take that one? Throwing it out there. How do you maintain that productivity over time, and especially with new projects that spin up when you can't start the project on a face-to-face?
I can try and take this. Sorry.
No, go for it.
Yeah, maybe Anthony, you can weigh in as well. Look, for us, this is how we do every project, so I suppose I don't have a good point of reference. But you know, it's been super important for us to just make sure you have those regular check-ins, set proper milestones, be clear in expectations, assign clear owners. You know, it just tends to be all the normal good practice, to be perfectly honest. Now, the situation is different. People may become demotivated. You know, for us, it's a steady state, and people join Scraping Hub knowing they want to work remotely and knowing what they're getting into. So I don't know, maybe somebody else can offer a good comparison of maybe someone who wasn't expecting to be working remotely. But for us, it's been about constant communication cadence, expectations, milestones, and just generally keeping the motivation high as well. It's been a little harder for us in groups that are a bit more social. I would say things like our sales team. How do you create that same buzz in a remote environment? What can you do to keep the motivation up? So there's that kind of human side as well to it. Yeah, anything to add?
Yeah, and I definitely agree there, Shane. I think, look, let's say for us, it's kind of been business as usual, largely within a lot of the IT projects that we're running. I guess what's changed here is the method of communication. So we've just kind of replaced face-to-face with virtual sessions, right? But look, we've carried on as normal, right? And just tried to adapt to the new communication style, right? But it's business as usual in terms of projects, right? And what we're actually finding as well is there are certain projects that are easier to get done in this type of model, right? Where, you know, people are not being distracted by maybe people coming into their office or, you know, ad hoc meetings or et cetera, right? And we're finding that in some cases productivity has kind of shot up because people have time to really sit back and really focus on a project as well, right? Rather than kind of being in an office environment where you're naturally distracted from time to time as well, right?
Super, thanks, Anthony. And there's also, I can see a question there about folks being reluctant to take annual leave at this time. And what I would say on that one is, you know, sometimes this is a great time to take annual leave, simply because we've seen some folks are, you know, struggling to separate the work day from the home life, and sometimes it goes on a bit longer. You're trying to stay active into the evenings and all that kind of stuff. So it's a great opportunity to spend quality time with family. So don't be discouraged from taking annual leave. I wouldn't, you know, don't let it all back up till the end of the year when companies are back to full tilt and looking for everybody on board. Now is a good opportunity to spend some quality time with family. We're 1 minute over, so I just want to wrap up with the final section there. So I know I put Anthony under pressure there earlier, so now I'm going to put them all under pressure just for a little bit of fun. So I'm going to do literally one sentence each, guys, starting with Anthony, and we'll go through everybody. Your one piece of advice for employers during this time. Go.
Yeah, and look, I think the guy said it much better than I will, right? I think it's communication. Just make sure that, you know, people don't feel isolated, for sure, and they don't feel so far removed from the company, right? So like, there's a lot of, like, the guys here, you know, the WorkVivos and the Populos of the world are massive enablers around communication, right? So I'd certainly say that from an employer perspective.
Perfect. John, in 30 seconds, your advice to employers.
I would say trust your employees, give them the tools to be successful, and make sure you continue to inject a bit of fun and personality digitally.
Brilliant. Yvonne, advice to employers?
Yes, look, this crisis is going to pass, but your employees won't forget how you looked after them and how you treated them during this crisis. And to keep that relationship going, just try and do your best, be flexible, be understanding.
We've long memories. Shane, your 30 seconds for employers.
Okay, it'd be show empathy. You know, if you're worried about somebody, if they don't seem to be doing what you're expecting, get on a call, see if they're doing okay. I think that's going to be the best approach.
Perfect. And the same thing now for employees, your advice to employees. Anthony, 30 seconds.
I'd say have a routine and don't feel like you always need to be on, certainly from my side.
Perfect. John, your advice to employees?
I would say it's okay to be human and put some routine, discipline around your day. It's okay to go for a run in the middle of the day. Yeah, and it's actually something we should encourage.
Perfect. Yvonne?
I think just try your best, look after yourself, look after your family, and that's all you can do is structure your day, do your best, and this is all going to pass.
Excellent. Happy home is a happy everyone. Shane, your advice to employees?
So work in establishing a good routine. Now, it may be very difficult right now, but just do the best you can and try and improve it and try and make things work better for you and keep the communication coming.
Cool. And to end on a funny note, Anthony, the funniest thing you've ever seen on a remote working call video, no names.
Yeah, I can definitely say I've never seen anything as funny as I've seen the last few days, right? When you see all the video clips kind of going around, right? I mean, they've been phenomenal, but I think the one that I saw in the last few days was the person on Microsoft Teams whose manager turned themselves into a potato and couldn't figure out how to turn it off. So they just carried on with the meeting, right? It was...
John, funniest thing you've ever seen?
I think the funniest is probably when I FaceTime my mother and she still picks up the phone and the phone is in her ear, so I'm actually seeing her ear. But I think the funniest is yet to come. I think the funniest is going to be when this thing goes on for a bit longer and everybody's forced to cut their own hair. I think that's going to lead to some interesting video calls.
No, we can never go there. Yvonne, funniest thing you've ever seen on a remote working call?
I'm still stuck on the BBC golden oldie of those two kids strolling in. It still makes me laugh the same amount every time I look at it, and it's just the horrification of that moment, being on live TV and having your children barge in. I just never can get past it.
A man that was clearly ahead of his time and set the pace for the rest of us. So Shane, the funniest thing you've ever seen?
Yeah, look, there's been some brilliant stuff online in the last couple of days. I don't think I can compete, and we've seen a lot of mistakes, but a couple of fun things actually you can do is we did a fancy dress, and we had somebody who was off camera, you know, and then karaoke music starts and just came in full fancy dress and everybody was getting laughing. So, you know, you can do stuff like that to actually raise the mood and have a bit of fun. And another tip, when you're screen sharing, like we are in this presentation, make sure you do not screen share your notifications coming in from WhatsApp, coming in from your email. That's just you're opening yourself up to all kinds of problems. So yeah.
That probably reminds me of the funniest one I've ever seen was someone's pop up and it said, have shower, walk dog. So we were all checking in with him later in the day to make sure he did both of those. So a huge thank you to our panel. Apologies, we've run a few minutes over. So huge thank you to Anthony O'Callaghan from the Carberry Group, from John Goulding from WorkVivo, Yvonne Frost from Populo, and Shane Evans from Scraping Hub. Special thanks to the IT at Cork team, and most especially Owen O'Mahony, Vivian O'Mahony, Jerry Murphy from VMware, and the whole Tech Talk team. I hope I haven't missed anyone there now, but definitely that's it from us. It's a new world. We're having to get used to remote working. Let's make it a lot of fun along the way and let people enjoy the experience. So that's it from us. Stay safe, and most importantly, stay safe. Thank you. Stay sane, I should say. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll be back soon. Take care.